been binge watching her content all day today, so I'm really excited for this conversation. And I want to start off with something that might be a bit sensitive, but how did you get into this relationship field? Everyone has their own origin story, but I'm curious how you got into all of this.
Yeah. So in 2023, I decided to call off my engagement after I found out that my fiance was cheating on me. And not only that, but I also was pregnant at the time. And so it was an incredibly challenging situation to be in. And I remember one of the last conversations I ever had with him was I just asked him, please don't ever do this to someone else. And he didn't give me a straight answer, which was insane to me. And then after that, I kind of took it upon myself to read all of the self development books, all the relationship books, and I decided to document my journey because I think, like so many women, it can feel incredibly embarrassing to start all over to call off your engagement. And I just didn't want women to feel alone in that journey. And yeah, I just never looked back and I built my platform from there.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about this stuff because that is a super traumatic event. I'm so sorry that happened to you. But tell us a little bit, like coming back from that, what were some of the things you found really helpful? Because I think this will resonate with a lot of women that are coming off of breakups or even just, partners that they weren't fully satisfied with. What were some things that really helped you?
I think building a really strong identity and decentering men. I think when it comes to decentering men, all that means is building an identity that is larger than your love life. Because I think so often women will only dream within the confines of what that relationship would allow for, and they stop dreaming for themselves. And so I think that was crucial. I think also keeping the promises that you make to yourself. I got into ultra running afterwards, and it was just such a challenging sport to get into, and it really filled my time. It was great to exercise, and it allowed me to practice, healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah, let's talk about this because I think it's such a important topic on building a life that you love. Because when you're in a relationship, especially an all-consuming relationship, it's almost very difficult to draw the lines of like where did that person start and where do I begin. So talk to us a little bit about your journey of coming out of that relationship and being like, okay, do I like running? Do I like to try other things? Talk about kind of exiting.
So when I exited, I packed up all my things, and I was living in Australia at the time. And so I had to move back in with my parents, basically start over from scratch. I was working minimum wage because when I was in Australia, I had taken a large step back in my career to support him with his, because initially I was working in the tech industry. And I just asked myself, what were the things that I loved doing growing up? And one of those things was making YouTube videos with my sister. I love content creation. And also, I've always been into running, but back then I was only doing, 5Ks, 10Ks. And so I asked myself, what is the craziest goal that I can set for myself? And for me, it was returning back to Sydney a year later and completing one of the most challenging endurance events that the city has every year, which is the Bondi to Manly Ultra Marathon. Also, I wanted to be financially independent. I knew I wanted to be my own boss. I knew I wanted to start my own business. He knew this, but he didn't think it was a good idea. And I think, like a lot of people who are starting their content creation journey, a lot of people in your life are going to tell you not to do it, that it's embarrassing, that it's cringy. But I was like, I'm going to do the damn thing, and I'm going to build this business. And so that's just what I did.
Yeah, I have to say, people, if you're thinking about getting into content creation, you really do have to cringe your way to success. Like you do suck for a few months and it's the initiation, right? Everyone's telling you to stop and they're actually kind of right, but you just have to be delusional.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So talk to us a little bit about when you started making content online. Did you focus on a particular topic? Was it like how to let go, how to, not need closure? Talk to us a little bit about some of the topics because I know you talk about, attachment and all of these different things.
I would say my very first viral series was The Power of Your Absence, and understanding that your absence will cut deeper than your words ever will. And I think that is the most challenging concept for my clients to grasp because they want to send the paragraphs, they want to blow up their phone. But really, it's the woman that walks away without a trace that ends up staying on that man's mind for the rest of his life. From what I've, experienced, I think also emotional regulation. I talk about that a lot. I did a whole series called Becoming Unrecognizable, and that also went viral. So those were the topics that I started off with, and then I branched off into avoidant attachment.
And I assume based off your username, I
LA.
assume anxiously attached. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
talk to us.
initially, pardon?
Oh, I said, talk to us a little bit about some of the work you've done there, because I know that's an issue a lot of our women struggle with is being like, man, I really want to blow up this guy's phone. I am really anxiously attached. My partner is avoidant.
I would say I created that handle because that is what I was struggling with at the time. And typically, when people want solutions to their problems, they're not looking for, how do I become securely attached? It's like, why am I so anxious? How do I stop, sabotaging my relationship? And so I really just wanted to understand how two children can grow up in the exact same household and turn out completely different. They can have two very different attachment styles. And so I always found that to be quite fascinating. And I just wanted to figure out what were some tools that I could use in order to heal myself so I would never have to experience that again. And I thought, okay, if I'm benefiting from this, then I know that there is someone else that definitely would as well.
And for the lovely ladies listening that are thinking like, wait, I'm secure, I'm insecure, and I'm anxiously attached, like, tell me some of the tools that you found particularly helpful. Because I'm sure you've read a bunch of books. I'm sure you've done a lot of the research, and obviously go to her channel and definitely binge watch it.
I think that being able to emotionally regulate without relying on a partner is huge. I talk about emotional diversification a lot on my platform, which is essentially having multiple sources of emotional validation, reassurance, and fulfillment. And people understand that in when it comes to your finances and never putting all your eggs in one basket. But I see women do it all the time in their relationships and they end up feeling miserable. They end up feeling like they're a burden on their partner. And to be honest, sometimes they are. And so it's really important to have a really full life because that is the most attractive thing that you can have. You know, it's really nice for a man to feel like, wow, I'm a part of her life, but I'm not her whole life. And you'll often find that it kind of keeps him on his toes because he knows that, okay, like if I don't treat her well, then I know that she's had a really happy life before me and she's going to be completely after me. And so, yeah.
And there was an interesting concept and something that I talk about because I'm a marketing nerd. And you were talking about on a video about scarcity. So talk about how, like, not only is it good to build your own robust life for personal life satisfaction, but also like scarcity wise, could you maybe go into the concept of scarcity and how that actually helps with some of your relationships?
I think that it's easy to feel almost entitled to something when you have it all the time. It's almost like when you're living with your parents, right? And you have your parents that are like cooking meals for you, they're driving you places, and that feels really nice. But understanding that sometimes access can breed blindness. Like you become so blind to what you have until you don't have it anymore. And you experience this with jobs that, wow, like this job actually provides a lot of stability until you don't have one. And the same goes for in relationships. And so I think it's just important to know that sometimes the best gift you can give a man is your absence because it allows him to experience what life is like without you and also kind of experience that contrast because oftentimes when men experience that contrast they have a greater appreciation for what you bring to the relationship.
I think one tricky thing, and I know a lot of my women have struggled with this in the past, is I used to run a volleyball league. And sometimes I would see when somebody would get a boyfriend or girlfriend, they would actually stop coming to volleyball. And sometimes it's difficult to maintain your life because the other partner, I don't know if it's a control thing, they kind of want to absorb you into their presence. Like, talk about how you can actually maintain your own life while still being in the relationship.
I think it's by taking personal responsibility and knowing that your partner is obviously going to want to spend a lot of time with you, but knowing that, okay, what do I need to do every day in order for me to respect myself? Because it's really easy to kind of become almost codependent with a partner when you stop doing all the things that you like. And oftentimes you can end up not liking who you become in the relationship. It's like you lose your identity and then you're kind of resentful of your partner. So I think it's just a matter of, every day kind of making really small promises to yourself that these are going to be the things that I do that I know 365 days from now, I'm going to be a lot closer to the goals that I want to achieve. Because ultimately, isn't that what you want in a healthy relationship? You want to build a life with the person while also achieving your personal goals.
Yeah, and not to fully center men, but a lot of the things that we were already doing, like going to volleyball, doing our, going to book club, those things made us attractive in the first place. And if we give them up for the relationship, we actually fundamentally change into a less attractive version. It's like, you imagine two companies, one that's not really making more money and the other that's constantly growing.
Mhm.
Obviously, the one that's constantly growing is more interesting. Let's talk a little bit about anxious and avoidance. I feel like that is such a hot topic online. I know you're quite familiar with the topic. Should all women just be avoiding avoidance? Because I feel like that's most of the comments I got is like, the avoidance, no, leave the plague.
You see, this is what I think. I think anxiously attached people are just as avoidant because at the core of every anxiously attached person is just a person who is in a severely avoidant relationship with themselves. They rely on other people in order to feel regulated and whole. And at the core of every avoidantly attached person is just a person who's in a severely anxious relationship with themselves. Their caregivers let them down. And so now they guard their independence and autonomy. And so it's just a matter of knowing that you can make a relationship with a work with any kind of attachment style so long as both of the people are aware of their shortcomings and where there needs to be work. But I think if you do want to avoid avoidance, then yeah, sure, go and do that. But I've also seen clients who are really set on one person that they know has an avoidant attachment style and they want to operate within that. And sometimes I'll post a reel online where I'll share a client story and people will get really upset and they'll say, well, why didn't you just leave him? But sometimes that's not what the client wants.
Yeah, and sometimes I actually heard Matthew Hussey talk about this. Some caller came in and was like, if I followed all your advice, I would be single. It's like relationships, they're hard and fast rules and they play well on content, but a lot of things are kind of gray. Of course, the things that are not gray leave immediately, but like there is a lot of communication that needs to happen. Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences between, because I saw this in your content, between emotional regulation and emotional discipline, and kind of square those two concepts for the listeners.
Okay, so emotional regulation is what you do to calm your body. And so that can be, exercise, that can be grounding, meditation, journaling, like those things that make you feel okay. But emotional discipline, that is what you do to control your behavior. So for example, emotional regulation is what you do at the gym. Emotional discipline is making sure you get there. It's making sure you do what you know, not what you feel, because if you constantly are doing what you feel, you're going to end up in a mess where you're constantly apologizing for what you do, that and you're being incredibly impulsive, and nobody wants to be around a very emotionally reactive person. So I think it's just a matter of having systems in place that allow you to stay emotionally regulated without even really having to try. So for me, and what I recommend to my clients is building strong habits around the core four, which is exercise, sleep, food, and vices. And so if
And
you
I would
can,
even
pardon?
I would even add journaling in there myself. We're big stands for journaling on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I love journaling.
Okay, so you got the core four. Is there a specific cadence that you recommend? It's like, hey, hit 3 week workouts a week, or it's just like, hey, these are the four things you need to do in any given week. Like, how do you kind of recommend that to your clients?
I think being able to prioritize at least one or two of those categories a day. I think for some of my clients, because they're very high achieving and because they, have oftentimes very successful careers, it's not realistic to do all of those in one day. But I think so long as you're setting yourself up for success and knowing that, okay, I know that when I drink alcohol, I don't make the best decisions. And so kind of limiting those things is crucial.
Let's talk a little bit about successful women because I feel like they face very unique. My sisters are lawyers. Well, people that are listeners of the podcast will know both my sisters are lawyers. My mom's a judge. So, like, I kind of grew up in this culture of very successful women. And I know that they have very different experiences in the dating market. I know you tend to mostly work with successful women. Talk to them a little bit about what are the unique challenges that some of these women are facing and kind of how you get around some of them.
I think the number one thing that I see successful women do in their relationships is they overfunction emotionally. And so they're used to being the one to just get the job done. And so that will serve you in your career, in your fitness, in your finances. But when you do everything in a relationship, women often end up in dynamics that they deeply resent, where they either feel like they're the parent in the relationship and they kind of feel like the man in the relationship, which isn't how they want to feel long term. And so defining success for a successful woman in relationships is often, how do I, step out of that role where I'm doing everything? Because my clients, what they always say to me is, I want to be able to turn my brain off and let them handle things because I'm going to be happy with where I end up. And I want to feel feminine, I want to feel wanted, I want to feel chased and desired. And typically it's the opposite of what you're taught in every other area. It's leaning back, it's doing less. And I think the crucial aspect of that is being able to emotionally regulate the part of yourself that's scared of what if he doesn't step up.
Yeah, let's talk about maybe, and this will probably be a common scenario. Okay, you're a partner at a law firm. The guy you're seeing is being quite slow on text. Your instinct might be to text him, blow up his phone. Talk about how, like, women that have been very served about being like hard charging or really like, putting their, how can they take that ability to step back and be like, you know what, let him come to me? Or is that not what you're purporting?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I would say. Because I have never, ever heard a client say, you know what? The reason why I'm so happy in my relationship is because he was non-committal, and then I did a backflip and I showed him all the reasons why I was worthwhile, and I cooked him all the meals, and I was an incredible mattress actress, and now he's in love with me and we're going to live happily ever after. No. Women want to be loved for who they are. They want to feel like they're just that irreplaceable presence in a man's life. But I find that men want to be appreciated for the doing, for what they bring to the relationship. They want to be respected. And so I think being able to ask yourself at any given moment, what is going to make me respect myself more? Is it going to be reaching out and making the plans, or is it going to be leaning back and letting his actions speak for him?
Yeah, and many listeners to me will know it doesn't matter how much banana bread you cook the guy. It does not matter. You cannot acts of service your way into a guy's heart if he doesn't really like you. It really doesn't matter what you're going to do for him. You're already in a box, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
I want to talk about, because this is something I've noticed, and I saw your video on like signs he secretly hates you. Is like your partner can sometimes be your biggest op, can sometimes be the person really in your way of success. Talk a little bit about that phenomenon, because I feel like it's not talked about nearly enough.
Yeah. How much time do you have? Like, this is this is so interesting to me, because I find that when your partner hates you, specifically if when a man hates you, the signs aren't dramatic. It is so subtle. And it really starts with the micro dismissals, the irritation at your presence when you try to be warm and inviting. It's the emotional stinginess, like not really providing that emotional reassurance that maybe you crave. And I think obviously there's a level of emotional reassurance that's too much. But I think just being able to reassure your partner that, yeah, I care for you, I love you, and I want to be there for you. But it's almost like the constant state that you're bothering him. That is the most common sign. I also think that men are painfully obvious when they like you, when they care for you. But when a man starts to be, disrespectful, when he starts to, give you all these put downs, when you are emotionally vulnerable with him and you get nothing, um, that's a sign that of a man that's emotionally checked out. And I think the most important thing that women can take away from, a sign that a man secretly hates you is that no man who is inherently benefiting from the access he's getting from you is going to say to your face, I hate you, I don't love you, but I love all this access I'm getting from you. But you're always going to be able to, sense it in the way he completely disregards your emotional well-being.
People want like a very good, for me, this really got hammered in by people can go to Gottman Institute and look up emotional bids, where essentially like we're constantly, making tiny bids for our partner's attention, and they'll see like, 80% or 70% of successful bids are for successful relationship. When a guy doesn't really like you, he's constantly rejecting your even minor bids for attention, and they'll pick apart your self-esteem. And they do it like, it is very like a manipulative. They view you as a placeholder. I hate to be crass here, but they really do view you almost like they're resenting your presence in their life, and it comes off little by little until it just builds up. I don't know if you've had experience with it, but it's very detrimental to people's self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I experienced in my engagement. And I think it's just important to know that there's no amount of people pleasing that's going to change his mind.
Yeah. And if people have people pleasing tendencies, I get no affiliate for this book, but Set Boundaries, Find Peace is a very good book because when you start to set boundaries and you start to set more like regular ass boundaries and you see that somebody's constantly overstepping them, it means that they do not value you as a person. They somehow feel that they're above your boundaries. At least that's what I've seen. It's quite sad, but I know that will probably be a good transition into your masterclass. She's
Mm.
Strict, definitely a very good name. So talk to us about what is She Strict about?
Okay, it She's Strict is my masterclass where I teach women all about emotional discipline, male psychology, and high value positioning. Because I think it's important to know that when you are going into the dating market, it's a lot like owning a company. And there's ways that you can kind of signal that you are high value, that you have high self esteem, and that you are desired by other people, and people want what other people want. And so I think being able to understand the psychology behind that, understanding that there's a way that you communicate with men, I think learning how to really set boundaries. And the way I teach women how to set boundaries is I call it less chihuahua, more composure, and really being able to show a person what your boundaries are, not tell them. Because it's very much like the two teachers we had in school. We had the strict teacher, the teacher that you knew from the moment you walked into her classroom that you had to come correct, otherwise you were going to, be thrown out. And then there was also the substitute teacher, the teacher that couldn't get the class quiet to save her life. And so both had very different demeanors, very different approaches. And so I think when it comes to setting boundaries with men, discovery is always going to be more impactful than disclosure. Let a man discover your boundaries and what happens when you are disrespected versus, blowing up his phone, constantly feeling like you have to be the one to disclose that if you do this again, I'm going to leave.
Yeah, let's talk about like why, and I've definitely had some content around this in the past. Like, why shouldn't they send the wall text? Why shouldn't they just call him 17 times?
Because it's almost like when you're in a grocery, like when you go into a grocery store and you see a mother and a child, and the mother says, "You better not touch that candy bar because if you do, you're going to get in trouble." And then what does the kid do? The kid goes and he touches the candy bar. So I think it's just a matter of knowing that when you say that this isn't something that you tolerate, oftentimes it can have the opposite effect, and in that, it'll trigger their ego, and then they want to be the one to show you that actually you can't tell me what to do, and they go and try and defy that.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of communication, but one thing that's tricky with guys is, and I always get in trouble for saying this, is they're a lot like men are a lot like dogs, where if you yell at a dog, it doesn't fully process the speech. It just sees that you're very excited. And in a weird way, crashing out on a guy translates to, she really likes me. In a very peculiar sense, it does,
Yeah,
because you're so over invested in the situation.
yeah, exactly.
So talk to us. Okay, so we talked about boundaries. What else do we go over in She's Strict? Because I want my ladies to be taking in some beautiful things. Of course, join the masterclass, but give us some sauce here that they could take away.
So yeah, we talk about boundaries. We talk about I talk about the quiet power framework because I think that when it comes to truly being powerful in relationships, it's not through what you say, it's through what you enforce. And so the quiet power framework is about silence, scarcity, and sanctions. So aka boundaries, because that is what men respond most to. Because I don't know about you, but it's almost like when you were in high school and you skipped class, and let's say you had a very strict mother, she was always on top of you. And so let's say you skip class. And so you're kind of used to her, sending you a text saying, "Where are you? What are you doing?" Okay. You're used to that. But what if you skip class one day and you know that your mother knows that you didn't go and you get nothing? You would be absolutely terrified walking through that door when you come home because you're like, I don't know what to expect. And so I think that when you show a man that you have the emotional discipline to starve him of your reaction, that renews his respect. And like I mentioned before, men's like love language is respect. And so I think it's all about being respected, not being liked, because what you like is going to vary throughout your life. What I liked 10 years ago is very different, but what I respect has stayed relatively consistent. And I've yet to see a successful relationship survive without it.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the issues that you see a lot of your clients coming to you with, and some of the things, like some of the practices you've implemented. So you talked about like that core four. Talk about some things that like everyday ladies can go at. Are there any books you recommend? Are there any kinds of things? Is it join the master class and you will learn all?
I really liked Robert Greene's books. His approach is definitely, dark psychology, but I think that knowledge really is power. And so I think that if you can just have this information, um, then it can really protect you in relationships because you can be able to tell when you're being manipulated. And instead of trying to say to him, oh my God, I know you're manipulating me because I read this book. No, you just know that, okay, I need to be very cautious around this person. And also the smartest women know exactly when to play dumb. And so being able to hold your cards close. Yeah, so I would say 48 laws of power, the laws of human nature, um, not men. That other book? Why Men
It's
Love
by Robert
Bitches.
Greene. Wow, yeah, that's a classic. Everyone loves that one.
That's a good book. Yeah.
I would add the if people like more of the spiritual stuff, I think The Mountain Is You is very good about self sabotage. Set boundaries, find peace is like it's like my most underlined. If people think they're people pleasers, I highly recommend that one. Let's talk a little bit about where people can kind of find you online and where they can better connect with you.
Yeah. So you can find me online at Anxiously Ally. Ally is spelled ALEJ. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, really everywhere.
She's prolific, by the way, guys. You're gonna look up her profile if you don't already know, and you're gonna be like, "Wow, you're way bigger than Jax." One day I will meet you.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Okay, so I'll put all the links down in the description. Ladies, obviously, go connect with her. I am excited to, if she'll let me, I'm excited to take the masterclass and see all of the interesting stuff that's in there. But until the next episode, thank you so much for coming on here.